online. I think this is a very interesting discussion about taxation. Um, as you know, taxation is a bad word for most people because, as Benjamin Franklin said once, there's nothing certain in life but taxes and death. I think in Lebanon there's nothing certain than death and tax evasion. This is a major issue in Lebanon because the compliance rate is very low. People don't really try their best to avoid paying taxes for a simple reason. They say that they are not receiving the kind of services they deserve after they pay their taxes, which is, I think, is a valid point. But here we get into the discussion, which one comes first. Providing services need revenues, and that's why I think we have to strike a good balance between providing services and paying taxes. Most people look at taxes as the only objective of raising revenue for the government in order to finance public spending, especially those that are still in the public sector, like security, army, health, education, and others. But I think, to me, the taxation or tax policy has equally important objectives, which are the distribution of income, because I think taxation will redistribute income from the well-off to the most vulnerable population. It has also it's a very important macroeconomic policy in order to boost the aggregate demand, for example, by reducing taxes, or it is a stabilizer, an automatic stabilizer, in the sense that when we have a recession, especially about income tax, when we have a recession, the people pay less taxes, which means in order to allow them to demand, to keep their demand. And also when there is expansion, then of course taxes will increase in order to avoid overheating of the economy and the inflation. So it's also very important. So that's why I think we have an impressive group of participants today, from speakers, panelists. I know we start from Dr. Ali Aboud, and from now on I say Ali without any that's to call it first name. Then we have Dr. Fawaz, and also we have my good friend Karim Daher. Just to give you an example, that I was in charge of a committee to look into the reform of the income tax in Lebanon, and Karim was part of this committee. And I think I can tell you really that without Karim, we couldn't have done it. We produced a very well articulated modern income tax, and we sent it to the Ministry of Finance. And I was told recently that it was sent to the cabinet. I'm not sure yet for discussion, but I hope they will act on it, because much work has been done in this with international experts, but Karim was the dynamo of the committee. So I, without further ado, I have much to say on this, but I think I'd leave the floor to the speakers. And probably I'll start with Karim, because he will give us more an overall picture of the taxation in Lebanon, and then we get into the more specific issues like sin taxation and the real estate taxation. So Karim, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Excellency. I think that no one will be surprised if I tell you that our tax regime and tax system in Lebanon is dysfunctional and full of gaps and deficiencies. Why? Because it is outdated first. Our tax system was adopted in 1959, and a few modifications, let me say, deep modification have occurred in our tax regime. What are the causes or the sources of this dysfunctional tax regime? Those deficiencies, those gaps. I will try with you, and I think that you have a presentation here. Maybe it will be broadcasted, yes, for you in order to follow me in my explanation. I will not tackle all because we have limited time for my presentation. Let me say that the first reason or the first source of deficiencies in our tax system is the scheduler taxes regime. And indirectly, His Excellency has referred to this because when we were working on the new tax law, it was mainly on the general income law that embrace all the revenues of any kind that exist currently. And we should couple also this scheduler tax regime with the territoriality regime of taxation, because we are one of the few countries in the world still applying the territoriality principle for the business income and for the professional income. What is the meaning of the territorial regime if we compare it with the residence regime or the dual regime, taking into consideration both criteria? The territorial regime only tax the revenues which have their sources in the territory. This is to say that in Lebanon, for business income, for professional income, and for other income like wages and salaries, or except the movable revenues, and we'll talk about the movable revenues afterward. Those are only taxed if they are generated and derived in Lebanon, which means that all the revenues that are generated abroad are currently not subject to taxation in Lebanon, which makes a difference because we have important revenues that are not within the tax base here in Lebanon, and the state has less revenues because of this system. And the other one, the scheduler tax regime, is adapted for each source of revenues. In 1959, it was an advantage to apply this kind of regime. Why? Because we were attracting capitals from the neighborhood, from the other countries, because you knew what happened at that time. But with the time, this has changed. And today, we need to put in the same tax base all the revenues. Whereas with this kind of regime, each source of revenue is taxed differently, or with a flat tax, or with a progressive tax. And it leaves aside important revenues. Let me provide you with an example that we worked on it with His Excellency concerning the revenues that have been or the profit that have been made through Sayrafa and through the repayment of loans at less than their real values. They argued, all the person argued, that in our tax regime we do not have any provision making those revenues liable to the taxation. Whereas we have found an article in the law, and it has never been adopted, but we found the Article 4, Paragraph D of the law, stating that if ever there is a revenue that is not subject to any scheduled tax, those scheduled tax I'm talking about, like wages and salary, like movable revenues, like business income, like real estate income, at this moment, this revenue will be subject to the Chapter 1, which means the business and the income tax revenues with the progressive rates. And this has been confirmed by the Constitutional Council, its latest decision about the budget. And now it is final and adopted. But we still need it with a view to make it officially adopted and recognized through a new tax law. And this tax law have worked together under supervision of His Excellency. And let me say that if he was not here, this law wouldn't exist today, because he did a lot in order to defend and to move forward with this law, despite all the constraints and all the impediments that occurred at that time. The second problem, I will only, in order not to take a lot of time.
Just, I think, for the audience, I think if you talk a bit about this tax, that we proposed to the cabinet.
The general income tax.
No, the one, because as you know, most of the corporate sector, they paid back their loans at 1,500, while the exchange rate was in the 90,000 and or so. So that's why Karim prepared, a draft law, and we submitted it because, I think what happened, I call this reverse Robin Hood, in the sense that the rich benefit at the cost of the poor because they are taking away from the depositor. So that's this is very important, and I think we should.
This is a kind of example of the imbalances and our dysfunctional tax regime today in Lebanon. Other source of other cause is the prevalence of indirect taxation. You know that today the indirect taxation prevails in Lebanon over the direct taxation, and we have in percentages around 70%, I think, in the latest budget, or the budget that will be adopted this year, 7% of the revenues that are from the indirect taxation. What are the indirect taxation? The custom duties, the VAT, the excise, and other similar taxes. Whereas the direct taxes are the income taxes, the taxes on real estate, movable assets, and all those taxes. What is the difference between both? And now maybe I'm giving more details because this is the part that should have been tackled by Dr. Ishaq Diwan, who is not here, but I will explain because he was intending to talk about the difference between direct and indirect taxes. The difference between both is that the direct taxes are considered to be fairer because they are based on progressive rates. You pay depending on your revenues, and it is progressive. A rate is progressive at each level of sources or revenues. We pay the same percentage, and then when you earn more, you pay more, which is fair and which is logic. Whereas the indirect taxes, everybody pays mostly the same and support the same burden of the taxes, which means that the money that will remain for each person, the situation will differ at this moment because certainly the rich person will have more remaining money in order for them to spend it, and the poor will not have any, like we say in Arabic, hamish for them to use it. And this is why all the countries are striving in order to make an equilibrium between the indirect taxes and the direct taxes. We have also in Lebanon another source, the inflation that erodes the equity and efficiency of certain tax provisions, like the family allowances. If you look at the family allowances today, it's practically nothing. For a single person, it's 450,000 or 450 million Lebanese pounds, which mean, I think, approximately $4,000 for the person, $4,000, and 450 million.
Okay.
450 million, I think, $4,000 or $5,000. Yes, $4,000 or $5,000, and for each children, 45 million less than $500 for each per year. This is another problem. We have also the tax incentive that are ill adapted to the current needs and subject to abuse, and we will see it because I have a part of my developments for those in tax incentive. We have also intentional loopholes and tailor-made measures in the tax legal framework and legislation, with the collusion between the ruling elite and with the group of pressure here in Lebanon. They use the laws, and I think that His Excellency knows that and witnessed that. They use the laws in order to take benefit of the situation and apply what is convenient for them. with those. And this is very dangerous because this is one of the reasons of the dysfunctional tax regime in Lebanon. We have also weak financial literacy and lack of tax citizenship. No awareness. Instead of telling the person, you have to pay the tax because it is a current and a future investment for you, pay the tax and then ask for accountability, and you will put an end for impunity. But the people think, because everything is directed towards the direct taxes, they think that if they avoid paying taxes, they are not paying taxes, whereas they are paying taxes with the indirect taxes. All of us are paying a lot of indirect taxes with the indirect taxes, and it is more than 200 billion dollars that have been generated and by the Lebanese state during 3 decades. Where are those funds? Those funds has been used for corruption, for clientelism, for communitarism and sectarism and other purposes. We have also at the Ministry of Finance lack of skilled labor force and material capacities to address the risk of tax fraud. And I think that with His Excellency we have witnessed the real problem at the Ministry of Finance, where we were drafting the law and we were discussing the law with the IMF. We found maybe one person with us from the ministry in order to defend or to discuss the content of this law with the IMF. This is very dangerous. And if it was for discussing the law, we have a problem in order to track or to assess that all has been made lawfully from the taxpayer. We have talked about the state capture, the collusion. We have a deficient and dysfunctional tax dispute resolution in terms of timeliness and efficiency. This is why the person resort to corruption, because they say to themselves, I pay bribes to the person at the Ministry of Finance instead of going and defending my case, even though my case is defendable and challengeable because I didn't make anything wrong about it. We have a domestic economy largely unproductive and dependent on remittances from Lebanese diaspora working abroad, which has proven to be unsustainable and unreliable for any tax strategy. What do we need? Now that we have seen what are the sources of and the causes of this dysfunctional tax regime, what is needed to have a fairer, more inclusive, and notably an efficient tax regime in Lebanon? I will divide it in 2 parts. The first part is what is needed to have a more inclusive and fairer tax regime, and then I will talk about the efficiency very quickly. I will only mention, without explaining, because I think that I'm late already, I will only mention what is needed. We need to apply first, to broaden the tax base, a tax identification number for each resident, whether national or foreigner, and link it to the personal ID or resident permit. We need also to reform the tax system through the adoption of the general personal income tax on overall revenues based on residence and territoriality principle and on worldwide income. This is very important in order to broaden the tax base and to make the system or the regime fairer. We need also to adopt strong safeguards and sanctions to provide a deterrent effect for reluctant taxpayers and enablers, especially for auditors and lawyers who are helping for tax evasion and tax avoidance. We have to rely on artificial intelligence, AI, with software for analyzing suspicious transaction and tax filing and cross-checking information via an integrated system like the data mining and the blockchain, with a full adoption of e-declaration and the e-payment for all taxes and taxpayers. we have to address the political capture of useful means and measures, because in as much we have still the bank secrecy prevailing, the Ministry of Finance will not have the tools and the means in order to track and to discover or to disclose all the tax evasion and the tax avoidance. We also need to use the tool that we have with the Global Forum, the exchange of information, financial information for tax purposes, in order to have financial information about the tax resident in Lebanon and apply the taxes and the sanctions and the penalties for those who did not pay their taxes. It will bring a lot of funds, lot of money, lot of revenues that may be used for social purposes, for the welfare of the citizens, and make the system fair at this moment. We have to strengthen the cooperation between all tax departments. Today, the tax department or the department are not working together. We have to link them with the AI and the internet in order to make a cross-checking of the information. What am I declaring at the tax Ministry of Finance? What am I declaring at the trade register? What am I declaring at the Social Security Fund? At that moment, they will cross-cut and they will make cross-checking of the information, and it will be easy to see who is infringing the law. We have to coordinate also with the local authorities, the municipalities, because there is a provision in the budget law of 2019 that has requested from the municipalities to make a field inquiry in order to see who are the person who are not, or the institutions and the entities that are not registered at the Ministry of Finance, and in order to broaden the tax base. We have to tackle the aggressive tax planning and optimization that exploit gaps and mismatches in the laws, and consider that the tax evasions, which is today lawful, unlawful when there are two cumulative conditions that are met. First, that it is for the cause, it is the sole purpose aiming to decrease the tax basis or to diminish the tax burden. And then for the effect, the goal will be to diminish public revenues and resources that are crucial to challenging inequalities. We have to promote the financial inclusion and the e-payment. We have to apply safeguard to prevent abuse of power, notably for the VAT. Adopt the earmark taxes, like for the repayment of for Sairafa and the repayment of the loan at less than their values, but also, and I think that Dr. Mona Fawaz will talk about it, the vacancy tax for to compensate long-term tenants and support housing policy, and also the sin taxes for all the harmful activities to restore accountability. Finally, and I think maybe I leave the other part of the efficiency, because I have proposed some measures that are adopted by other countries, and they have succeeded in their ranking concerning the doing business, like Estonia, Georgia, and Latvia, concerning the corporate tax, because they have zero tax on realized benefit, and the taxation will apply when this benefit will be distributed. And this is very interesting to promote the activities of the productive activity here in Lebanon. In as much those revenues are not distributed to the shareholders, there will be no taxes, and it will simplify also the tax return and the tax declaration, because they will not declare unless they distribute revenues. All those money will be reinvested to create jobs, to enhance the activity of the company, and this will promote growth, and it will promote also it will help for export and for the balance of payment. And for individuals, we have the example of Italy, also the recent example of Italy that replaced UK concerning the tailor-made incentive for persons, for residents, because Italy is proposing to exempt all the residents that are newly resident in Italy, and they will stay for approximately 15 years, of taxes for foreign source of revenues, and they will pay for those foreign source of revenue 100,000 euro. And they will pay on their revenue like the remittance system in UK that prevailed for years and for decades. They use it, but they have also other tailor-made, like for the impatries worker, qualified workers that come to Italy, or those who want to retire in southern Italy, or those who want to benefit from researchers and professors. This is very interesting, and those are ideas that may be used by Lebanon for the future, because we need to see Lebanon once again as a regional financial platforms, and we have adapted vehicles and tools like the offshore, like the holding, and we need also to give another example from the failing banking system, and let them see that we have also other ways to do finance and to do banking with the family business offices, with the funds and other things. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Karim. Thank you so much. You raised so many issues. I'm sure there are many questions on these issues. But I turn now to Dr. Fawaz to give us her take on state taxation.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the invitation, for the moderation. My first disclaimer is I'm not an economist nor a lawyer, so I'm a city planner, and I came with the fabulous team I work with at the Beirut Urban Lab. They're here, including our coordinator, Abir, who really authored this presentation. So I came to be interested in property taxes because I research housing and I research land uses and urban production, and what you find out is that the entire structure of incentives that regulates these aspects of our cities is actually counterproductive. So we push public authorities to do the wrong thing. We push the citizens to do the wrong thing. We push investors to do the wrong thing. And the work I'm presenting today is the outcome of about 4 years in which you said that without Karim we couldn't have done it. We also couldn't have done it without Karim. So it's a series of deliberate sessions and research and actual direct surveys in Beirut that I will share with you, just to give you a really rapid, quick look at what is it we're doing with our taxation and the governance of land that we have, and give just a few directions for where we can go. And I'll set my timer so I don't exceed the 10 minutes I'm given. Okay. All right. So why land taxation? So we start from the position that land taxation is a strategic tool. So it's not, for me, land taxation, or for city planners, land taxation is not a way to gain money for the state. It's a way to foster the optimal productive value of land, to benefit the widest collectivity, but also to have the most productive value of land, so serve both the social and the economic value of land. Land is not a common good. It's not like buying a chocolate bar. You can produce more of it. It's not making a difference. So the supply, we did, but the supply remained limited. So it's a very inelastic curve. Land's value is primarily its location. It's embedded in social and institutional and cultural factors. And the main way we derive profit from land is rent. Yani, I don't do anything productive. I find a way to extract from land because I own it. And these And so what we've been doing, as I said in the lab, is work through multiple ways to approach, to understand better how this is happening. And because the rentier economy is very strong in Lebanon, and particularly in relation to land, it's very hard to find numbers. I would argue that in the last 30 years, we have actually done everything we can to confuse things, to unmap things, so that people can't know what there is. And for about 10 years, I and many other activist scholars, we used to go around and say we're taxing wrong, the prices are artificially high, there's too many vacant apartments, and we were told always, we don't know, we don't really know. So we decided to know. And the way we did it is twofold. One strategy was to map every single policy that affected housing, and I won't describe them here, but these are the policies that affected housing since the inception of modern Lebanon in 1943 until today. And what you see vertically are the issuance of the laws, and from right to left, to the far left are policies that value the use value of land, and to the right, those that actually emphasize its value as asset. Suffice it to say that before the Civil War, you see a solid cluster to the left, and there was, it's not true we never did anything, we didn't care. Like, we cared, we actually introduced policies to allow people to have homes. And what you see is since 1990, more and more influential and bigger policies are coming towards the right to encourage investment in housing. So we're looking at housing, at our housing units, not as a place to live in or to go out to work, but as a place to place our capital. And we basically went around and traced every single building permit that was filed in Beirut since 1990 and until 2023. So what you see here are all the building permits in Beirut. In yellow are the residential ones. In blue are the industrial, commercial ones over the period of time. We've added to this the FDIs and the price of oil. I could talk about this graph for 3 hours, but I'm just going to focus on taxation and tell you that a good chunk of these policies are actually either loans that are provided by the state to incentivize the flow of capital, or taxations to facilitate investment in real estate. These are the main taxations, so facilitating investment in property. They're available online. You can pull them out on the site of the Urban Lab. So we share all our data. We want people to use it. And what you see are also the incentives that were introduced to raise a little bit the taxation on the developers in 2017, but really not enough. But by and large, the structure of our incentives has produced this kind of city, which is a city that's unlivable, dense, and with a lot of high rises. And the developers have changed the regulations to build higher and more with the argument that the more we build, the more there's supply, the supply demand, so the prices go down. In fact, the prices never went down. What's the consequences of building this? The first consequence is zero ethos of repair. We demolish and we rebuild. So between 2008 and 2014, we replaced 10% of our capital city's building. You realize 1 in 10 building. This is huge environmental cost. The whole Kassarat, our mountains are disappearing, not only Beirut. Then the second thing is, what did we build? So 80% of what we built is residential. We're not building places for people to work from. We're not building commercial venues. We're building homes. And then these form about 15% of our GDP, but only 0.4% of our employment. So we're not creating jobs by building so much. Is anyone living in those? Actually, who profits then? We traced every single developer and looked at them. Well, surprise, surprise, 30%, the 30 top developers have built about the third of the city. So our building industry is highly concentrated. The profit is in very few hands. It's very hard for the smaller developers to enter. So there are about 999 is, I think, the number Isabella zoomed in at the end. But most of the small ones are many who pull together and then they go bankrupt. And the big ones don't, because they can wait. They can get bank loans and then pay them in Lebanese pounds and profit. Again, this was tracing what kind of taxations exist on developers, and we can share them with you guys. But the main point is the taxation on the developers are very limited in comparison to the kind of profits that they make. And we interviewed developers to find this out. Couple more things about speculative. We think that the that the building is essentially speculative. The first point is that about half the buildings are actually what we call luxurious. They're more than 350 square meters, and they're priced above 3,500 square meters per meter square. So they're luxurious. And of course, they're mostly empty. 41% of what we built since 1996 is empty. Empty يعني مش expat owns it and lives elsewhere and uses it 2 weeks a year. Empty means no furniture inside the apartment. 41% are empty. Of the luxurious one, the total empty stock by survey, statistically representative in Beirut in 2023 is 19%. This is what we call hyper vacancy. If you're interested in these numbers, there's a report here that summarizes them and explains how we reached them. But what I want to tell you is most of these have been empty for more than 2 years. So it's actually a persistent vacancy. And also that, okay, let's skip. And the biggest vacancy is in the luxurious apartments. Okay, so the other thing that happens when you raise the price of land this way is that public authorities can't anymore intervene to help, neither in the right to housing nor in producing public plans. So if you look at how the public housing agency is trying to provide loans for people to live and work in Lebanon's capital city, the more the price of land grows, the less they actually, so they're running behind it to provide loans for people to keep up with inflation. But that's not sustainable. That doesn't empower public authorities. And worse, we have about 33% of any public project we build, in Beirut it's actually higher, that goes on expropriation. Just to give you a benchmark, it should never go beyond 7, 8, in other cities. Outside cities, we're talking 5%. So we're basically incapacitating our public authorities from being able to do that. It's of course not by chance. The people who are legislating are the people who are benefiting. Finally, one very important point, municipal authorities get their main funding from those taxes, from people who build, from the building permits. So what happens is you give incentives to the city authorities to actually destroy buildings so that new buildings come up. And that, of course, is terrible for the built environment, for our natural landscape, for our ecologies. So what can we do to change things? If we want to really introduce property taxations, before we do anything, we need to have a proper valuation model for land. Our research on land valuation says that it's so ad hoc. It's insane. We have valuators, professional valuators who are hired without knowing another professional valuator is hired. Both of them like recommended from the central bank or from important banks who value the difference between the same building by more than $12 million, the same apartment by more than $4 million. This is science. They're all experiments we've run. We've paid them, they went, they evaluated, they came back with massive differences, and we couldn't reconcile them. Even within the same public agency, inside the municipality, 2 offices can value the same property with massive difference. The Ministry of Finance doesn't collaborate with the municipality, each one evaluates differently. So short of having adequate land valuation models like any other country, and these are really, at this age of AI, very easy to do. But short of this, we're hopeless. Let's not talk. The second thing we should absolutely do is a very low-hanging fruit. We should, I'm not saying tax vacancy. Most cities around the world now in the advanced economies tax vacancy. So if you leave your apartment empty in Paris, you pay every year more taxes because you're hurting the urban economy, because you're hurting people's right to housing. We exempt empty units from taxes, from municipal taxes, and from property taxes. That is a direct ticket telling someone you forgot your property since 1970, بسيطة, ما بتدفع ضرائب. And that, of course, is a massive incentive. You guys talked about people not paying their taxes for over-reporting. So our figures from the municipality of Beirut indicate that 1 in 2 apartments is reported vacant. So the municipality of Beirut uses every year millions of dollars millions of dollars in taxation because people over-report and the municipality doesn't check it. Finally, we really need to start moving towards land value capture mechanisms. So these are ways in which the the profit wrapped from land as a rent, yani if you have a view over the sea, if the state came and designed a park across from your house, if the state designed the road in front of your house and the property value increased, that increase in property value, you didn't earn it. It's the collective, the public did it, and that value needs to be captured. We have a small tax called the betterment tax. It's true, most of these taxes, we have some pieces of them in our laws that work. So Darib al-Tahsin is a good start. We don't really implement it, but we need to look at it more generally. We have sold our seafront in Beirut where developers making $2 million out of the sea view, nothing came back to the city. They actually shadowed the corniche, which in urban planning regulations, you don't cast shadow on public land. And if you do, you pay massive taxes. So there's a whole world of land value taxation that I can explain, but that would help us, because if you look at the values of property in Beirut, the highest are those that overlook Harsh Beirut, that overlook the Corniche, that overlook AUB actually. So you kind of need to get that tax back, and then of course regulate beyond, so that the way in which land is developed, actually the profits of it go back to the common good and not to individual developers. All cities around the world, in closing, because when I make this presentation, I'm accused of being anti-development. All cities around the world look at allowing someone to build in the city as a privilege. It's not a right that you're given. And I think it's really important that we begin to understand that. We look at developers and their right to profit from the city as God-given. They need to be partners with us to build a better city, and not just profiteers and rentiers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mona. I think this is very interesting presentation. I learned a lot. I didn't know much about this subject. It's very important. I think I will read all the slides carefully, which is something we should really follow up on.
Happy to.
And we have some questions, but I think for the sake of time, I will move to Ali. And you have to pay the price. You have only 10 minutes.
Yeah, no problem. I already told Mona she gets 5 of my minutes before. And actually, this is like the 3rd or 4th time I hear Mona presenting, and I always want to learn something more. And one thing we should tax the buildings just across from here, because we're providing them a public good. The other thing I learned from Karim is that I should consider retiring in Italy, southern Italy. Maybe that's like a good option. So I have very brief slides. They're just like there to guide me. So I'm going to wait until I'll start by telling you what I'm going to talk about. So I'm going to talk about something like kind of the antithesis of what Karim was talking about, like indirect taxation. So I'm going to talk about VAT. It can actually be progressive if we can think about it. And the other thing I'm going to talk about is like another form of indirect tax, which is what's commonly called sin tax, but I like to call it corrective tax. So you can see progressive VAT and corrective taxation. And if you can move to the first slide, please. These are things. I'm going to engage with a little bit of the presentation that happened, that took place before, and very quickly. This was, Dr. Saadi already talked about this. Like, why do we tax? There are 3 reasons that are commonly stated. Like, we need to finance the state, for basic services like security, common services, the bureaucracy, and so on. This is very well understood. The other reason is the redistributive purposes. In general, we have tendency to believe that some equality is reasonable. Now, there is always a question: is how much equality do we want? And so taxation are often seen as a main tool to redistribute, take from those who have to and give to those who don't. And that could be in different forms. That would be through the provision of basic services like healthcare, education, or through direct program like cash transfers and so on. The other reason why we tax is to correct. Okay, and this is here an efficiency argument. Is we think sometimes under certain conditions, where when we have externalities, for example, and so on, people might, or when people don't plan well for the future, if they have a myopic view, there isn't rationale for the government to tax to try to fix that choice. Now, there is a 4th reason that I think it's particular now to Lebanon in this current circumstances, like financial legitimacy. And this is what, the current Minister of Economy always talk about, is like, the state have a very light footprint in Lebanon, and that's mostly through the fiscal space. The government in Lebanon, especially since the crisis, doesn't really play a big role in the economy. And so, in a sense, taxation and rethinking the tax system is one way for the government to reestablish itself in the economy, but also it's a one way to, like, what was mentioned at the beginning about like thinking is like, should I pay money if I'm not going to get the services and so on? What I'm going to argue is that some of the taxes can be used to rebuild that legitimacy, or what sometimes people also call trust in the economy. Next slide. So, like, I'm going to briefly like give you some numbers. So, like, and these are very like basic raw numbers about what we know, and I'm going to build on each one of these numbers for my argument. So, I mean, first, in Lebanon, we don't have a solid tax bureaucracy. That was mentioned extensively in Karim's presentation. So, like, most countries that have like an elaborate tax system, they have a very wide bureaucratic. Like in the US, you have the IRS. It's one of the biggest like bureaucratic system to track taxation, to make sure that people are paying the tax that they have to pay, to audit people, to audit firms, to audit individuals, and so on. We don't have that in Lebanon, okay? And that's not uncommon. Most developing economies, most poor countries, most like small countries, they don't have developed bureaucracies for taxes. And that doesn't mean we shouldn't build one, but we're starting from the fact that we don't have that. Now, how does that's complicated by additional things. So I'm thinking mostly about individuals here, but I'm going to talk a little bit about firms, but mostly about individuals. Like, we have high rates of employment informality. So a lot of people just like, our own account workers, they work in, their work is infrequent. They work on daily rates. They provide services. They mostly deal with cash. So these are really hard to track. And that's like, according to the last CAS survey, it's 62.4% of the labor force. We have a large number of self-employed people. And the self-employed people are a wide range of people. So this includes from engineers and doctors who have small practices to like people who have a small shop. And that's a wide range of like, of income. And again, a lot of these people also work in cash. I mean, cash economy is also a major issue in Lebanon, because in Lebanon, even large enterprises work in cash. Okay, like if you go to, I mean, we think a small shop, they accept cash, but also, Spinneys and the big shops, they also accept cash. And so how are you? These are massive like revenues that and exchange of or massive transactions that happen on daily basis, and they become really hard to track. Now, and also, like, I mean, Mona talked about, taxation of, real estate, but, more generally, like capital gains in general. I mean, there are many political reasons, and as well as auditing challenges. How do we value land? And like you just Mona mentioned the examples, like, supposed experts are unable to do that. And so like this adds to the complication of having like, direct taxation. The other thing so this is like my first data point. The other data point I want to talk about is consumption. So in Lebanon, consumption to GDP was estimated around 123%. And that's like in 2023. In post-Civil War era, that's a very high rate. And and that's not unusual. That's not just the crisis, because in the post-Civil War era, we're pretty much like we consume as much as we produce, which is very high compared to the rest of the world. Now, why now the other? So that's an average. Okay, so that's some aggregate number. But then, what do we know about the distribution? Well, we don't know much because we don't have household expenditure surveys. Everything is pretty much an estimation. So we have a rough idea. We have some anecdotal evidence. We have a lot of things, but one thing we can have a hint from is customs data. So when we look at customs data, we look on categories of goods that are imported. Oftentimes, like we mostly import consumption. We import a lot of luxury items like expensive cars, like and other things. Now, again, this is not decisive evidence, but a lot of this data hint that there is inequality in consumption, and that our consumption is often geared toward more and more luxury goods, which indicate that a lot of people, at the top end of the distribution tend to consume more. So there is a huge inequality in consumption. And that was made worse during the crisis. So during the crisis, imports of food and medicine decreased, but imports of cars increased. Okay, so and so that indicates that, yes, we often think about the crisis as something bad, but it seems it was less bad for a lot of people. So where a lot of people could maintain their quality of life and their consumption habit. In addition to income, we have significant inequality in wealth. Okay, and so a lot of time when we talk about income taxes, we're forgetting about wealth. We're also forgetting about income that's earned abroad. I mean, when you talk about businesses earning income abroad, a lot of Lebanese in Lebanon live out of remittances, which is form of income generated by a family member abroad and sent into the country for consumption, and that's technically not taxed through a direct tax. So that's my second data point. The third data point is a simple fact. It's currently VAT is the biggest source of income. So it's 70% is the total indirect taxes. VAT is around 52% of estimated tax revenue. And we have a very well established, so if we can move to the next slide, we have a very well established VAT tax system. Okay, so now regressive or progressive? That's the biggest question. And so as Karim was saying, indirect taxes are often perceived as regressive. And that's true. When we think about the textbook case, where we're thinking about a closed economy, where everyone's generating their income in the country, and if we're thinking about it in a static way, technically, a high-income person will not spend all their income. So if we're just taxing them on their consumption, we're only taxing them on a part of their income. But that's under a lot of assumptions. Okay, we don't live in a closed economy. A lot of our income a lot of the money spent in the country come from abroad. So this one. Second, we don't live in a static economy. We live in a dynamic economy. So whatever people don't spend today, they spend tomorrow. And so so eventually that will be taxed. Now, and especially in the context of Lebanon, these assumptions, they don't materialize because due to the severe wealth inequalities, wealth plays a big role in how we consume, and so that's another way so by taxing consumption, that's a way to tax wealth, and these inequalities in income, wealth, and access to remittances, because also there is inequality there. Not everyone has someone abroad, and often this is dynamic and generational, because a lot of time to send someone abroad to generate enough income for you, you have to start from some level of wealth, and so in a sense, a well-designed, the argument that I'm going to is a well-designed consumption tax can play a bigger dynamic redistributive role. Obviously, so I talked about inequality in remittances and income generated outside the country, and which also contribute to significant inequality in consumption, and so taxing consumption is a path to redistributing these inequalities. Now, consumption taxes can be made progressive. It's true that often we think this is flat rate, but the reality, VAT is not flat. Currently, there is an 11% and a 0% VAT. So there is no reason why we can't have more brackets of VAT, that they can be based on different categories of products and value of products. Okay, so if we're taxing cars, there is obviously a wide range of value of cars, and we can make that tax on cars progressive, or the VAT rate on that progressive. And obviously, wealthier people, higher income people are buying more expensive cars. Poor people are buying cheaper cars. And the thing is, because the well-established bureaucracy, and because by its nature, these taxes are simpler to institute and to build. They're sometimes arithmetically difficult, but it's nothing that not a basic formula can do. They might be more easily implemented in Lebanon and can reach a wider tax base. And it's often a tax base that is evading income tax that can be captured through taxes. My last slide. So my last slide is I want to talk about a specific type of indirect tax, which is the corrective taxation. And I'm going to tell you about what we learned from a study we did on tobacco taxation. And so tobacco is a very large market in Lebanon with a complex supply chain and large consumption base. Okay, so around 66% of Lebanese smoke in a way or another. Most of them are. Yeah. Yes, that's including. Directly. That includes people who regularly smoke, like cigarette smokers and so on, and that includes people who socially smoke, like water pipe and so on. But if you're thinking about consistent smoker, that's around 42%, which is really high. Compared, our region has high consumption smoking, but Lebanon is among the highest, and it's across all income groups, and when we look at different demographics and heterogeneity, we don't detect difference in prevalence, but we detect difference in the type of what they smoke. So what brands they smoke, whether they smoke water pipe or cigarette and so on. Now, our study, so we focused on cigarette taxation. And so currently the main taxes on cigarettes in Lebanon were VAT, the custom tax, and they implemented an ad valorem excise tax. So essentially all of these are taxes that are proportional to the price. Now what happens when you have taxes proportional to the price, especially when they only apply to specific brand, not other, what happens, consumers will switch brand. Okay, so you tax Marlboro, people will move to Cedars, or Marlboro become more expensive. And this is what we noticed during the crisis. Cedars became the #1 brand because everyone was just moving there because it's juice price. So obviously this kind of tax doesn't work well. Now what we look at is an excise specific tax, which is then it's not proportional to the value. It's basically kind of like a fixed tax rate per item. Okay, and so we did a small simulation based on recently estimated demand function that we obtained through a survey, and we found that by imposing a relatively reasonable excise tax, reasonable. Some smokers will not like it, but around 20 or 30 cents per cigarette pack, tax revenue could double in Lebanon. Not only tax revenue could double, it can reduce smoking among the lower income group. Okay. Now, the other thing we looked at in this tobacco study is the revenue. So we studied consumption pattern of water pipe between people who smoke at home versus people who smoke in cafe. Because a lot of time when we're thinking about these products, we're not thinking about the supply chain of these products, not just the consumers. The consumption behavior is obviously that high income people and high wealth people, basically people who can spend, they spend significant amount of money in cafes, and that means, or restaurants and so on, basically all touristic establishment, and that signifies that there is huge revenues being generated by these establishments from the selling tobacco, which is also true about alcohol, by the way, and so that opened rooms for generating additional public funds, whether you want to call it tax or something else, through a fee from these establishments that benefit from selling these kind of bads, these products. And there are different ways to design that. I mean, some people might think it's hard to set. Actually, it's not. An auction for licensing fees for tobacco and so on can generate a lot of revenues because it will actually reveal how much these establishments value this product, selling this product. So that could be another source of revenue through taxing bads. The last thing, so this tax can actually be very progressive because the people who will adjust their consumption are the low-income people, which often suffer severely from consuming these products for different reasons. So first, because it's highly elastic among low individuals, so they tend to reduce their consumption. But also, if we think that these people have hyperbolic discounting due financial literacy and general literacy and so on, these are the people who are likely to respond to price. Basically, we're able to correct their behavior by using that. Now, a lot of the findings here from the tobacco study can apply to other bads like alcohol, sugary drinks, high-calorie meals, etc. The other thing to keep in mind is the supply chain of these products in Lebanon are mostly monopolistic. So it's not just people consuming bad things. It's there are a lot of people generating a lot of revenue and profit out of this, and so it's reasonable when we're taxing, we're actually tapping into these revenues, and that's by itself also can be redistributive. I think the last point is basically to go back to the legitimacy, is basically these kind of taxes also offer a rationale for earmarking. So earmarking in Lebanon is often not desirable by law or whatever. But the thing is these kind of products can be, and I think in the latest, there was a proposal by the previous government that was kind of rescinded by the parliament, which included an excise tax on alcohol and tobacco, and that was supposed to pay or finance part of a universal healthcare plan or so on. That gives legitimacy. So when people ask, where's my tax going to go? Well, it's going to go to finance these programs. And through that, we can start rebuilding trust, because trust is not a metaphysical concept. It needs to be established through actions, and these kind of actions could build for this. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ali, so much for this interesting presentation. I personally have a lot of questions, but I think what I will do first, I will give Karim 3 minutes, 2 minutes, because you think, and then I'll open it for discussion.
No, very quickly. It's not something new because if I would like to provide you with a practical example about the tax evasion of promoters in the presentation of Mona, what they did for years to evade taxation. They used two methods, two ways. The first way is they register the land and the buildings in their own name with their family. Let us say that a person with 3 brothers and nephews, we have 40 persons. They registered the land and they built the building with 40 owners. At this moment, when they when they sell each apartment, they sold it as an individual and they were exempted from the taxes. For years and years and years, promoters of all those buildings didn't pay tax. And if they had corporate or entities, legal entities, they used another loophole, which is the law of the promotion of investment, the IDAL, the law number 360, because this law provide incentives with what we call salat al-hawafis. This is a contract that I have signed, and they consider that they have allotted the first floor or the ground floor for, let us say, stores or something like that, which is tourism for them. And they have built a building with 20 stairs or more. And they have said this is tourism. We are exempted for 10 years from income tax and from built tax and other taxes. This was used by those persons for years as a tax avoidance. Concerning the vacancy, I always talk to my students at the university. I give them the example of the Emperor Diocletian. Diocletian, when the Roman Empire was falling down and collapsing, he wanted to reboost the empire, and he witnessed that all his soldiers and the person were not motivated to make any to go and fight or to exploit the lands and other, and they were spending times with luxury and something like that. And he decided at that moment to apply a tax, and it has been titled the Jugatio Terrena, on the empty lands for the person who have lands and other real estates. And if ever they do not exploit this land or those real estate, they will pay taxes. This is why it has changed everything. And the Roman Empire lasted for 100 years after this time. Concerning Ali, only this is the final thing, the remittances. We have also fortunately, I will say, not unfortunately, a gap or a loophole in the law. Because concerning the inheritance and gift tax in Lebanon, it's only the donor who triggers the liability to tax. When the donor provide money to any person, if he is tax resident in Lebanon, the beneficiary will pay taxes. Whereas when the donor is abroad and he sent money to beneficiaries who are in Lebanon, they are exempted from the tax. You see, for the remittances, if we only change the law and we say that today, like in other countries, in UK, France, Italy, and all other countries, those are the beneficiaries who pay taxes if they are resident in the country. If we say today that we will levy taxes on the remittances because the beneficiaries are tax resident in Lebanon, we will have between 3% and 45%, depending on the degree of if they are close family or something like that. Let us say 15% or 20% as an average, 20% on $7 billion per year. This makes $1,400,000 with one provision in the law. You see how the taxes is a leverage, and it's a tool in order to increase the revenues or to change the whole situation. This is what I wanted to clarify.
Are there any questions from the audience?
That I was interested in.
You can tell us which one it is. There are 3 publications.
Is there, okay, specifically the one with the contractors, the main contractors in town?
Oh, yeah, no, this is not.
Sorry?
This is not.
Okay, can I, but
The
you,
name of the bigger developers, no. We have IRB issues here at the UP, so we have ethical issues here at the UP in releasing names and interviewing individuals. So we are not releasing the name of the developers, we just release the concentration. Yeah,
oh, but you had them on the list, I saw it.
yeah.
I should have caught it quicker than you, but anyway.
I mean, actually, I mean, it's complicated, but we're not publishing these names for now, yeah.
Anybody else has a question? اسألوا شيء. أنا عندي سؤال.
Okay. I have a question. There's always a talk about indirect versus direct taxes in Lebanon, and that the indirect taxes are 70% of the total, and this is not regressive, and so on and so forth. But I think there's no other way to change the balance unless you change the structure of the economy, because the consumption tax. Because as you know, we are really a country of consumption. So that's why I think the indirect taxes, which are the VAT and other, are much higher, especially at the border, because we collect them at the border with customs and so on. So I think this is a fact of life in terms of the distribution. And I don't think it will change unless we move to more productive economy where, have more income tax, more corporate tax, and so on and so forth. So I don't know if you have any ideas or any problems with this, but yeah.
Question related to that. I mean, we are not in a steady state economy, right? We are 50% below our normal production level. And so there is a question of a transition here. I mean, what do we do to get out of the hole? And the hole is partly, production. Production is very low, probably because there is no demand, but also because the cost of production is very high. But the other part of the problem, which is, also because, the banking sector is not working, so production costs are even higher. Now you could say, how are we going to recover? It is difficult to have a recovery without a banking sector. But the bigger problem is that the state has collapsed by more than twice, by 3 times or more, right? The last budget was $4 billion. In 2018, we're at 15. So this is a huge collapse of the state. You can't have an economy without the state. You can't have a country without the state. So, you want to recover. And so you're saying, let's tax consumption. But consumption is very low. Production is low because consumption is low. So we're in a trap, in a Keynesian trap, basically. So ideally, you don't want a tax, you don't want a regressive tax because this reduces demand and doesn't allow production to go. So we have real difficulty of thinking of how we tax during a transition. We do need to tax because unless tax revenue go up, the state will not recover. We have a state now that cannot even pay salaries, very low salaries, therefore low demand. And so, I mean, the heterodox thing to do would be to tax the rich. But it's difficult to tax the rich, perhaps, but tax the rich, increase wages, so increase demand and catch up this way. What we've seen instead is fiscal surpluses, which is like really the last thing you want to see. So just to say, your thoughts about the transition, because that's really tough.
Can also add something about the VAT and the regressive tax. I think, as Ali said, probably this could be more progressive. But, there are people who are saying that the VAT is a progressive tax on consumption, which means, especially if you exempt all the basic necessities and also the services like education, health, and so on and so forth. So then if you exclude those, then obviously the richer are paying more than the poorer segment of the population. So I don't think we should push too much that, and regarding the multiple rates, this issue has been discussed in the past. And for reasons of administration in Lebanon, it's extremely easy for them to change if you want, the name of the product in order to pay less taxes. So at that time, when the VAT was introduced, it was thought that probably it's better and more simpler. It's simpler to use one rate, which is flat rate on everything. Now, there's of course tension between the two, but this is what was decided.
I mean, first, I don't think it's an issue of income versus of income tax versus direct tax or indirect tax. The reality, I mean, as you said, the reason we pay indirect tax plays a bigger role because we're mostly consumption, and I know we dropped in consumption and production and everything, but even before the crisis, we were a high consumption society. So it was always consumption was driving the economy. Now, the issue on the comment on these multiple rates. At the end, you can link it to value. Like if I'm taxing cars, I can link it to ranges. So it's no longer about changing brand names or so on. I mean, one thing we haven't really talked on is it was there in all presentation, but we never really mentioned, it's the political economy of taxing. It's there is a reason why these loopholes exist. They're not just mistakes. There is a reason why, we don't tax vacant apartment. It's because it's about who benefits and who loses. Now, a lot of our arguments were redistributive, but taxes should be used to stimulate economy. But the reason why I think we're all stuck on the redistributive argument is because we see that the current tax system is really made so some people can remain rich out of an unproductive economy. No one here wants to be rich by making the economy more productive, because technically that's the capitalist textbook model is we're productive, we generate something, we get revenue, we become wealthier. The reality is that we want to remain unproductive yet still make wealth by having monopoly power and by playing the system. So I think that's a big question whenever we're thinking about fixing our fiscal system, is how are we going to solve that political economy issue, which arises in everything. Whenever we're thinking about the banking sector, whenever we're thinking about everything, it's about the imbalance in power. That's
yeah. We have experienced this political economy firsthand, because when we were preparing the amendments or the reform of the income tax law, actually we invited the business association to be part of the committee in order, so they can give us their views. And what happened, Karim knows, what happened, they designated 2 members, they attended 2 meetings, and then we got a letter from the head of the association saying that you are destroying the economy and we are not going to participate, and they withdrew their participation from the committee. So
the worldwide taxation.
Because they were really fighting in order to avoid paying taxes at any cost. So, and given the nexus between the political establishment and the business establishment, of course, they have a lot of leverage on the politicians, and that's why we have this dilemma in Lebanon. Yeah.
If I may, concerning the question that you have, or the issue that you have raised concerning direct or indirect taxation, I do not consider that it is a irreversible cycle. I consider that we may still change the thing, even though we rely on consumption here in Lebanon, because if you reboost the economy and you strengthen the productive economy and the export, don't forget that with the export you are able to retrieve the taxes that you have supported here in Lebanon. And at this moment, the impact of the indirect taxation will decrease. And you may also provide exemption for the reinvestment, as I have said with the Estonian model. You push the companies to reinvest and not to distribute. You put less money in the hand of the wealthy people or the consumers. There are many ways in order to change the thing and to make it reversible and not irreversible. I think that if we take the right decision, if we make prior impact, economic impact assessment and studies, I think that we have possibilities to change, to still change the average between both.
Did you have a chance to speak about the income tax proposal? It'd be interesting to hear because, you know, you were high up in government and somehow it didn't pass.
Of the brief that has been provided about the law by the IMF. If you want me to read the paragraph, it's expressive about the content of the law. Do you want me to read it? It's very brief. Okay. This note, it is sent by the team, the tax team of the IMF, and Dr. Saadeh knows that. This note reviews the draft Lebanese Unified Tax Law on the income of natural persons and on the profits of companies and other legal persons. The draft combines under a single code legislation for all income taxes, including corporate income tax and personal income tax payable by individuals, partnership, corporates, and other legal entities, except for entities operating in the petroleum sector because they have their own law, the law number 57, I think, which will continue to be governed by the law number 57, dated 2017, and excluding deemed income on self-occupied built property by legal entities which continue to be governed by the Built Property Law of 1962. The tax procedures continues to be laid down in the law number 44, dated 11 November 2008. This draft law is expected to replace the existing income tax legislation. The draft bill or the project is expected to replace the existing income tax legislation of 1959, which has been subsequently amended through several subsidiary instruments. This effort is expected to increase coherence, remove redundancies and contradiction in the existing legislation, facilitate accessibility and transparency of the income tax law for the taxpayer, which were hitherto scattered, and update definition and include new anti-abuse provisions. That are anti-abuse provision concerning the hybrid mismatches, concerning the transfer pricing policies, the arm's length principles. All those has been addressed in the law. The draft law incorporates new thresholds and rates aligned with realities and inflation and includes provision to deal with the current crisis, such as special provision for mergers of banks, guarantors, and corporates, currency conversion, and computation of capital gains and property.
Basically, the idea was really because there are different tax rates for different sources of income. The idea is, I mean, some people call it the unified or the global income tax or unified income tax. Is that to put everything under one umbrella, one category, and then tax them at one rate. This is the main adjustment or the main fundamental change in the law.
This is written. This is what they say. The draft law envisages a move from the scheduler system to a global system, which means income from different sources is proposed to be clubbed in the tax base and taxed on a progressive basis. For natural person and at flat rate for corporates, except for tax on income from movable capital, which is to be taxed at 10%. This is a positive step at this, as this will reduce administrative and economic inefficiency and promote equity. A floor has been proposed on minimum taxes.
That's very good. So, I mean, you're all saying that this is a good proposal, right? So this is a good proposal, just to understand the political economy that was discussed in cabinet, the Miati cabinet, right? And what happened to it? Why is it in a drawer now? Did the process die, or is it still moving ahead?
You know, we prepared this law and we were planning to send it to the cabinet, but at that time, you know, the term of the cabinet ended. So I was hoping that the current government will take it over. I asked recently somebody in the Ministry of Finance. He told me that the draft was sent to the cabinet. I hope this is true. Then, of course, if the cabinet discussed it, changed it, amended, and so on, it will be a good step forward before sending to the parliament. But that the issue is in the parliament. You know that some laws, I remember that the law on Social Security, I think, it was approved after 23 years. So, so I'm not hopeful that this will be approved quickly, even if it were transferred. But at least the government would have to make, you know, to take this job seriously and submit it. But you know, I said, as Ali said, also some of the syntaxes that we proposed, they were reversed by the current government for reasons I cannot really explain, except. Even this issue was entangled in sectarian politics, and you know we don't want to tax alcohol too much and so on, and then you know so and also some other vested interest that sell tobacco or other sugary product. Because I know that in the cabinet, once I was talking about sugary product and so on, somebody and the cabinet said no, and this is not good and so on. Then I realized later that he has some association with a company that produces sugary products. So that's
That's why we map the developers. It's to connect them to the banks and to the parliament and trace out the entire triangle. We haven't finished this job, but that's why we started looking for them. But the building law that was passed in 2004 that actually is responsible for the destruction of Beirut was actually written by the syndicate of developers who actually gave it to a developer in parliament who got it to pass. So the problem is a political problem. It's not a problem of know-how. It's obvious, yeah.
No, I was going to say the same thing. I mean, how do you build trust? I don't think any of us I mean, we all know what was happening with the funds that were available. Where have they gone for the last 30, 40, 50 years? We were all paying our taxes. We know where they're going. So why is any of these technical solutions going to solve anybody's problem? I don't think they are. And you know as well as we do that they're not. Back to the empty apartments. I mean, in the absence of other investment options, that's all people have. Is it جمعوا لهم قرشين اشتروا شقة خلوها فاضية وما بيبيعوها بيقولوا إنه أسعار نازلة لا ما نازلة ما حدا لأنه nobody's going to sell their real estate because they didn't take a loan to get it. They actually had some cash and they bought it, which is not the way the rest of the world operates. So we have too many problems.
It's really how you want to govern that land. And it's really important to think about that because I fully put myself in the position of someone who had a little bit of money and invested in an apartment and is leaving it empty. And it feels unfair. Why are we taxing it? But there's two things. First, we're not saying tax them more than anyone. The sheer fact your property value will deteriorate if the municipality doesn't clean your sidewalk very simply and secures your building. And the municipality cannot do it if you don't pay taxes. It's unreasonable to actually exempt from municipal taxation because the apartment is empty. In fact, it's more expensive. If you keep an apartment empty, you are hurting the neighborhood.
How many people don't pay if it's vacant though? Like
Half the city of Beirut has reported to the municipality that their apartments are empty. It's not true. The survey shows that it's around 19%. But 1 in 2 people has reported that the apartment is empty and doesn't pay taxes. So if you want the municipality of Beirut to remove these awful trash bins that are on the street, just so we can walk on the sidewalk, they need the revenue. And the local taxes are very important because they are actually, like we can render the municipality accountable. Of course, we should be voting in Beirut, which we don't. So it is a political problem, but I think that we can actually force the municipality to be accountable if it has its means. We should do something about this. And these are simple things. They're not like the vested big interests in Parliament. And I think in Parliament, the problem is much bigger and the politics are more rooted. But those simple things, and the vacancy tax has been added to the budget 3 times now, and it gets scratched. And then last time, we almost hoped it was gonna pass, and then they told me, okay, رح تعملوا على النص. I was couldn't believe it. And إنه نصها إنه بيدفعوا نص ضريبة وبعدين آخر شيء ما ورقت. So
the reality is not about that individuals, because a vacancy tax does affect big developers because it affects like the real estate market as a whole. So the idea was they wanted to create a real estate bubble. They want that was the only way they can, use all that finance that's coming, and so by imposing a vacancy tax, you will disrupt that market. So it's not just they're not
guys, we're not imposing a vacancy tax.
No,
we're really careful. We are just asking to remove the exemption.
Yeah, no. I'm in favor of a vacancy tax.
There is an issue which is important. If you want to strengthen the tax citizenship, you should change the law of the real estate or the built property. Because if you want to apply a tax on the vacancy, this tax should be allocated to the local authorities and not to the treasury. Because if it goes to the treasury, it will be misused. This is why it should be allotted to the local authorities and scrutinized by all the taxpayers in order to see how it will be. Sorry?
We don't vote for that.
No, so we should change the law and vote. Okay, but look. For example, in France, in Paris, you are paying tax on vacancy or on second residence in France, which is doubled now because they have exempted the person who live in their house in their first residence from the tax residency tax. This is why you are paying twice, and this is what should be done. And at this moment, you use the proceeds of this tax in order to realize some project in the city. Yes, in the city. As an earmark.
Okay, that's the. I will. Please.
Yeah, كمان the built property tax كمان في the scheduler aspect of it as well. يعني كمان it's paid for each property on its own, which كمان is very distortive for the market. لأن كمان it's it incentivizes people to be spreading their investment on different properties rather than putting it in like compact investment. So this is one thing. But I have a question to Dr. Ali. أول شيء you mentioned the capital gains tax. The capital gains tax with the fact it's difficult to audit. أنا what إنه هيك my impression, this is an argument that شرب النحاس does, that is إنه capital gains tax have like a very benevolent mechanism where there is an incentive for both the buyers and the sellers like to report the right amount, because for example if the buyer ends up like reporting a lower amount for the property, they end up paying a larger capital gains tax later on, because like it's a difference between like at the time of the acquisition and at the time of them selling it. So my question is, what like technically what are the things that are making it harder to like get the right numbers from the capital gains tax? And the second thing also for you is that when we are focusing on consumption taxes, what are we expecting exactly to happen with savings, for example, and the accumulation of wealth through savings? This is also, I think, something that is not captured by consumption. And we also have to take into consideration people who are using their money and spending them abroad, which is also like something also we're losing from consumption taxes.
True. In general, I wasn't arguing of one against the other. So like, I think we should have an income tax, a consumption tax, and this is what like most countries do. Like, actually, like now, even in the US, some economists are arguing for a federal VAT. like Greg Mankiw had an intervention about that. But so for the first one, for the capital tax, I didn't say it was not. I said the rate was low. So in Lebanon, the rate of capital gains is very low. And that was like always a historical, like, political debate. I think, I mean, but it's resolved if we have like the unified income tax, because capital gains should be taxed as like all other income. So, and I think, yeah, it's definitely much more better observed than income. I think capturing all like labor, income, and profit is the hardest in Lebanon. But then there was like interest gains, interest income because of the secrecy law. That was always an issue. But technically, banks could tax it directly, but their lobby would refuse to raise the rate. Kermel, for savings, I mean, technically, in theory, whatever is saved today will be consumed tomorrow. So technically, like, if you're thinking about it in a dynamic way, even you pass it to your children and so on, they will be also taxed in the future. So technically, at some point, it will be taxed, that income. Well, if saving is invested also.
If whoever had a saving of less than $200,000, they lost it.
I know, but we're talking about no, we're talking about like the equivalency, whether like if the argument that the wealthy don't spend all their income, so we're not taxing them on all their income. The other is like you'll be taxing them tomorrow on whatever they didn't consume today, and so on. So that's like part of it. It might affect so that's the thing. Consumption tax, a progressive consumption might affect also incentives to save. And in cases like economies like Lebanon, it's not a bad idea to save because we have a problem of overconsumption. So that's like another issue, especially if we want people. I mean, we want people to consume food and medicine. We don't want them buying, luxurious cars every year.
I think the question is important to think about. If we want
Great. I think we are coming to the end of the session. I have one nagging issue in my head about the tax citizenship, as you called it. What is the best way to encourage people to really to pay their taxes? It's really this is the question, fundamental question, easy question, but difficult. I know the answer will be difficult. And I was thinking of the idea of that since we are very divided countries, would the decentralization of the system helps in encouraging people to pay taxes in their communities? Because, so, okay, I don't want to pay taxes in Ashrafi because this will go to the Dahi, for example, because we have the central system. But I want to pay tax in Ashrafi, and the revenue or the services should come back to me in Ashrafi, for example. I'm not talking about me, I'm talking about the, okay, so this is, and also they can monitor the spending in their own community much better than if you have a central system. So do you have any, am I pushing this
No,
argument?
not at all, but there are something which are in our hands and other things which are not in our hand. What are in our hand is the awareness, the diffusion of the information, because I think that we have a problem with the financial literacy in Lebanon. Yeah. Nobody knows what are the basics of the taxation, of the taxes, or for what is the use of the tax, what should be what should be done with the taxes. If you explain to the citizens, and we organize town hall for those kind of awareness and education, a part of what is done in the universities with our students. We explain that we have this vicious circle. We do not pay tax, and when we do not pay tax, the corruption persists. And when the corruption persists, they buy votes, and the votes bring back the same person at the same position. And this is the vicious circle we are witnessing for at least 3 decades, if it's not much more. We should stop this vicious circle and go to the virtuous circle. How? We say to ourselves, we have duties today. We have duties, we have to pay tax because this is the law. The law is very clear, and the law states very clearly that when we earn any benefit, any profit, we have to pay, because the tax citizenship means that you are living in the same portion of territory and we have accepted the rules and the laws, and there is a social contract when everybody contribute to the role of the state. What is the role of the state? It's not only financing its need. The role of the state is social, and the role of the state is economical. Also, to use the tax as a tool in order to realize objective for the welfare and other things. And when we explain to the people that thing, there is a counterpart. They are also obliged to follow the use of the taxes and to see what have been done with the taxes, and to make accountable all the persons, the MPs, when they vote for the MPs. This is a political sanction, and the MPs should also, with the Council of Ministers, put motion censure, I don't know how we call it, and make the government also accountable towards them. And at this moment, the things will change, and the state will use the taxes in order to realize, and we need small success stories. We need small success stories to show the person. And this is why we have proposed the earmark taxes. Because when we work together, Dr. Saadi, on the draft bill, and you know that we have also submitted another draft bill with MPs concerning Sayrafa and the subsidies, if ever we use those funds in order to repay the deposit, because those funds have been stolen from the deposits. And if we repay depositors with those taxes, at this moment, this is a small success story that will lead us towards other success stories. Concerning the second question, what was the second question?
It was a question about decentralization.
Decentralization. I personally believe in decentralization and in financial decentralization, but not now. You need a strong central state, a central authority, in order not to export what do you have in the central power authority to the other local authorities. Because I believe that if we have the same system today, you will have the same problem at the level of the local authorities, because nothing will change. We have still the leaders in each community that will have their authority will prevail in this, and they will use the funds in the same way. This is what frightens me.
Okay, thank you so much for this interesting discussion. I think there are still many questions in my mind. So thanks again for the panelists, and thanks you for everyone. We hope to see you next time. Thank you so much.